Hey guys, this episode of The Secret Podcast is pretty image heavy. So we made a video version, we put it on YouTube. You can find it at youtube.com/c/The Secret Treasure Hunt, or there's a link in the description below. Enjoy.
The last rule, and it's a weird one, is that at any time you address Bradley, you have to call him sire.
Yeah.
It's weird. We have to do it too.
Okay.
Don't feel, like we're picking.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
Get it. I don't get it. We do it anyway. That's just how it's
All
weird.
Right. Very good. I'm just going to take some lipstick and mark that over his picture.
Okay,
here,
perfect.
So
There you
Yes. Don't forget. Don't forget that.
And you don't have to use it when you're speaking about me in third person, though. That's forgivable.
And
Wait. How do I speak about you in third person?
well, he'll do it. He does it a lot.
Oh, okay.
So
He does
you
it.
just follow his lead, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay. Are we ready?
Yes.
I
I'm
don't
ready.
have anything planned. Oh, Bradley's got his lipstick going on.
He mentioned
Okay.
lipsticks, and I was like, hey, you know what?
Nobody
I'm
told me
feeling
we
a
were
little
going to need
chapped.
lipstick.
Yeah,
and now I'm like,
dudes.
what am I gonna
What
do?
is this?
It's a melon medley.
Ooh.
It's pretty tasty.
Yeah, that's
Does it taste like everything that you get with that's melon? I always expect to taste like old watermelon bubble yum.
Kind of.
my fave.
Nice.
Kind of, yeah.
That
Yeah,
stuff was
and
good.
it's Blistex, so it's actually good quality stuff.
No.
Yeah. Actually works.
All right. Welcome to the Secret Podcast. We're here today. It's me, George, Brett, Bradley, the sire, apparently, and Stephen Poff. Stephen Poff is a friend of mine he's been down to St. Augustine several times. We worked on New Orleans a little bit together.
Mhm.
We're going to talk about some special thoughts and some ideas that we've had about St. Augustine, because we've been, pretty in depth into this one. You and I.
I've got a lot of thoughts.
Yeah. Stephen, can you tell us really quickly how you got into the hunt?
Actually, my friend Travis Schuler, who I'm sure you guys know, you've probably seen him in the Facebook groups plenty, but he works on New Orleans, and he was doing a dig over there and invited me to the dig and had a ton of fun. And at that point, I was hooked. I think about a couple weeks later, I was in St. Augustine, just had a spur of the moment, decided I knew where it was, and came down. And obviously I don't have a casque, so I didn't know where it was.
Oh,
that's
You
how
don't
I
have
got
a casque
involved.
Wait.
yet.
So
Right.
we thought this was a cask revealing. Guys, this is over. Let's end this right now.
All right. Talk to you
Sorry,
later.
dude. Sorry. Next. No, stay. So cool. So, and by the way, when was
Cut
this?
that.
When were you in St. Augustine?
Oh shoot.
That would have been years ago, right?
I feel like it was about 3 years ago. It was short. It was probably within the first year of the Expedition Unknown. The first time it came out, it was within that year.
Yeah. Travis is a great dude too. I really
is.
hope he gets some headway in New Orleans for his
He's-
sanity.
He's super knowledgeable, and
Yeah.
he has a wealth of knowledge on a few laptops that are at his house right now.
He posted pictures of like the leg eater lamp, but they were candelabras, and it looked like they were on his like fireplace. I think
I think that might be the
I
case.
think
He
he
just got a new house.
I think he bought like leg eater from Montreal candelabras. Like they were super awesome looking. Candles.
I'll have to go
not
check
so
that
much,
out.
but
Yeah, he didn't send that to me.
Candle holders are awesome.
I know, I've got
Anyway.
an important question, and I can
Okay.
tell by your background that, Stephen, you're going to be a subject matter expert. Is it at or AT?
I mean, I always call it an AT-AT, but I think technically it's probably AT-AT, but it's
I
kind of like the,
always call it
the
an AT-AT.
ATSTs, you call them chicken walkers. I don't think that they have chickens and, on indoor, but there's definitely chicken walkers on indoor.
There you go. That's all I wanted to know, guys. The rest is up to you two.
Oh,
man.
fun. This is how the podcast works. It's the bullshit conversation that we edited together to sound like we know what we're
Right.
talking about.
This is going to come out sounding
So
like super pro.
let's talk St. Augustine. Out of all,
Sorry, go ahead.
yeah. Let's talk St. Augustine. All the times you've been to St. Augustine with me, I don't think we've been to the Fountain of Youth, right? You've never really been a Fountain of Youth guy.
Well, I mean, funny enough, I go every time that I've been up
Do you?
there. Yeah. Well, the first time I went, I didn't go. Technically, I didn't go to the Fountain of Youth, but I was all around it. I definitely did. Go to Magnolia. I had obviously, the first thing you want to do is go to Water Street, right, and look across the street at Fountain of Youth. So I did that. But yeah, I've never been. I feel like no one else has found it there, and it's been dug up plenty that I had other thoughts and I wanted to explore those. So yeah, every time I've been, I've generally, gone on the island.
Yeah. And I think I don't think either of us, when we realized that we were both looking in basically the same place, I don't think either of us realized that we were both basically in the same place.
No.
Right?
No.
Which was fun because like I was all alone in my search for the longest time in this one little place.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, somebody else is here. Nice.
Well, I was a little scared too. Yeah, because
the auditorium.
Yeah, the amphitheater.
The amphitheater. I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think that was the thing that you actually, I was on my way down and had messaged you, and you kind of gave me a hint that you were in that area. I was like, oh man, damn it.
Yeah. I've been digging
one.
there for like I've been digging there for like a year. It's
Right.
crazy. Cause it's a weird place because there's not much verse stuff there, right? There's just not a whole lot. All of the good verse stuff is at the Fountain of Youth, but the image stuff that's there is crazy.
It's incredible.
There's nothing at the Fountain of Youth that matches. Everything that matches is in that one little park on the island.
Yeah.
So how did you interpret the whole of the St. Augustine puzzle to get you to that spot?
Well, I mean, oddly enough, I mean, even though you're saying that it doesn't match up as much with the verse, the thing that I kept coming back around to was the whole silver salt limestone, shell and limestone, because the more I kept thinking about that section,
Mm-hmm.
I kept going like, what do these things have in common? Like, I know that everybody kind of talks about coquina, right? But like the silver salt part, right? And I thought, oh, well, like all of those things are things you get out of the ground. All of those things are things that you would quarry out, right? Where there's really only one place where that takes place. Well, one is that the amphitheater is the old quarry, right?
Right.
And the Lake Notina, I don't know if anybody knows that that's what it's called, but it's called Lake Notina. That's at the amphitheater. Is the old quarry, and then the actual quarry that you can kind of enter in from like right there at the entrance of the state park, which by the way has a green picket fence above it. You have to enter through bending branches to get to the quarry. That was where I was like, okay, well, this is the quarry. These are all the things that go along. And at that point, I realized as I started going in there that there's a trail that leads directly, like if you just go into the quarry and you just keep walking, there's a trail that goes and it leads directly into the amphitheater and directly into that garden in the backstage of the amphitheater. And then that's where I started going like, oh my God, like once I got in there, I was like, there's a whole boatload of, things in here that actually do kind of make sense.
So let's give people a little bit of an idea of what we're talking about, because this is an area not many people, even really if you live in St. Augustine, you don't really know about it unless you're old. If you're old, you know about the amphitheater, you know about Coquina Gardens, but past like 1986 or whatever, you don't know anything about this area. So the state of Florida used to have a state play. It was called The Cross and the Sword. It was written, I think, like 1965-ish. It was written by Paul Green. Mm-hmm. It's the same guy that did the Lost Colony in Roanoke.
Mm-hmm.
And St. Augustine held this play in the same way that the Lost Colonies held in Roanoke. They built a large amphitheater with a park around it, and they did this play every day during the summer in the same way it's done in, like, we're going to go back to this a lot, in the same way it's done in Roanoke. Then, later, like, interest in the play sort of started to wane. And I think in the 90s, like the early 90s, I'm sure Stephen knows exactly when this was. It was basically shut down and turned over to, it was like the entire park was demolished. The amphitheater was demolished. It was rebuilt. It was essentially sold over to the city, and now they use it for concerts. But back in the 80s, it was a major tourist attraction. It was where you go to see the state play, The Cross and the Sword. And The Cross and the Sword is about sort of the is it Ponce de Leon coming over, or is it Menendez? I'm pretty sure it's about Menendez and his interactions with the Timucuan Indians.
Yeah. So
we see a lot of parallels between this park, this location, and Fort Raleigh in Roanoke. There's a whole lot of parallels, but like I said, now since it was demolished, the gardens were no longer kept up. They're essentially, they're overgrown. They're just basically a forest. There's paths and things in the back, but if you didn't know they were there, you would never be able to find them. And Stephen's right. If you start at the Anastasia State Park, there's a trail that leads right to the entrance of them. So it's a super interesting place.
It is. And then if you start, there's things that, look, it could be confirmation bias, because I think there's plenty with all of this is, you can start going like, oh, well, this would be this and this would be that. But I mean, I think that's how a lot of, the three casques that have been found, like, you could confirmation bias yourself all into it until you get to the actual place and then you go, oh no, this does actually make sense. This could be that, this could be that. But, there are certain lines, like, first of all, one of the things that is interesting, Laura Olson, who is now, she's also looking for the casque there in Florida, but she was actually part of the play. And I reached out to her early on and was like, I'd kind of found her through one of the Facebook groups for Cross and Sword. And she told me that play, started at dusk. That was like part of the deal. Right. And I was like, oh, well, there's so much of this verse that's about light and dark, night and day, right? And so I started thinking about, like, whenever you take that trail, the trail actually leads directly to backstage. It leads right there to where you would have seen stars moving by day, right? Because they're getting ready for the play, right? And in that same area, when it turned night, they would be on stage, but the thing that you would see moving back and forth because of the play was the ship, the sails. They had a ship. Matter of fact, I have a picture of it here. There's a ship.
It was built on railroad tracks behind the stage.
Yeah, and they would
roll it.
They would push it back and forth.
Lost Colony.
Yeah, exactly like Lost Colony. Right.
So there's your sail. So not only would you see the stars of the play by day, but you would also see this right here, this boat that they would just basically keep pushing back and forth, behind the stage. People didn't ride on it, from my understanding. Laura says that nobody got on it or did anything. They just basically pushed it back and forth. It was just a prop. So once you get things like that, then you're like, oh, well, that whole stars by day, sails by night thing makes a whole lot more sense. It could very possibly be at Fountain of Youth, because that makes a whole lot of sense as well. But if it's not at Fountain of Youth, it's at the amphitheater, then this also works to me really well.
Really well. So the bad thing about the amphitheater now is, once it started getting a little run down, there was a lot of theft. Some of the signs were stolen. The whole place was ripped up. We know that there were walking paths starting at the Anastasia State Park. We know that there were walking paths, and along the way there were signs that explained what you were seeing. Most of those are gone now. In fact, most of the things that we're going to refer to that could have been represented in the verse, they're not there anymore. I know as soon as you start walking down the trail, there's a sign that explains to you what the different trees are that you're seeing, and they specifically call out the tall tree, which they use I think it's a redwood, some sort of redwood tree that they specifically call out as a tall tree. There's a lot of little things in this park, and they're just not here anymore, and no one can find them. We've talked to, or at least I know I have, Stephen, you've probably talked to groundskeepers too, where they found a couple of signs but can't find all of them, can't find most of them.
Yeah, as far as the labels on the trees and things like that, I don't have any documentation on that. I do have documentation on some other things, like, for instance, when you go into the park, there is a, let's see if I can pull this up right quick.
So while he's pulling that up,
there's a monument that's out there. I'll tell you what, we'll just go to the VR player. Well, first of all, there's this, right?
Yeah.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Mhm.
But hold on just a second.
That thing on the left is there, that blue.
Yeah, that's an exact copy of the painting.
Why are you guys doing this right now? You guys should be out there digging.
So
while he's pulling this up, George, the only things I really know of this area are things that you have told me that you found. Am I cool just to talk about whatever you've told me, or?
I think so. I don't think I've told you anything of Stevens. I don't think there's anything of Stevens he hasn't put online.
Well, so there's a couple of things I'm going to reveal in there.
Well, I don't.
Okay. Yeah. Any of my stuff you can talk about, I'm fine with it. I don't care.
Okay.
So when you walk in there's essentially the trail to the garden. When you first walk up the steps, there's like this monument that's right here. And it used to have a plaque on it. And that one said, hold on, I've got my notes here. It said, this garden dedicated to the public, 1967, Cherokee Garden Club. So not that that's super important, but it is one of those things like George said, that they, have ripped off there, and that's not there anymore. Also, slightly behind that, there's a magnolia tree, and it was, let's see, I do have a picture of these two ladies who were dedicating. So they were, at the same time that they were dedicating that monument that was there, they were also dedicating this, they put it up at this tree, and it was basically to this lady named Joyce, who had been a part of building the trails and everything through there. And then, cool. But she had gotten sick and wasn't able to do it anymore. So they kind of dedicated that to her. But yeah, so there was things like that, like George was pointing out, that, have since been vandalized and it's not there anymore.
And I think it's important for listeners or viewers to keep in your head, like when we say a garden, that this place was a garden, you're thinking like it's just a, like a big flower bed, when it was absolutely not that. This is probably 20, 30 acres, maybe, with winding concrete paths, huge ponds, like concrete ponds with stones built up for walls, huge waterfalls, water wheels, invasive plants that the state's now trying to remove. Like it was a spectacle back then. And the ladies, the gardening club took a great deal of pride in it. It's not a normal, it's more impressive than the Elizabethan gardens to me.
So that,
yeah, it was beautiful.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's actually what I was going to ask. Would this be a place where more than just known to locals, people would come down and maybe visit it if they were in the area, they knew about it, people knew about the play?
This on the 70s and in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, this was on the same level as the fort in regards to tourism. I mean, it was advertised everywhere. It was on all of our brochures. It was as soon as you would drive on the island, there's a huge wooden painted sign, like a very impressive sign that tells you how to get to the amphitheater. Then when you would pull into the amphitheater, the entire front facade, the road facing facade of it, was built up like a giant wooden fort.
Mm-hmm.
It was huge. So yeah, it's not something that that would be hidden from tourists at all. It was very visible, and like I said, kind of on the same level as the fort. If you were going to St. Augustine, you were going to see the fort.
And so do you think that maybe Byron was looking at Fountain of Youth or at least that area, and then goes, oh, rather than Fountain of Youth, this seems like a great place and I can bury lots of clues here or find lots of clues with this place? Or what would make him choose it over something like Fountain of Youth?
I ain't gotta buy a ticket to get into this place. Like that would be the biggest thing to me. I mean, you can't really argue that Byron went to the Fountain of Youth. Even if there wasn't something buried in St. Augustine, I would still say if Byron uses the word casque, he went to the Fountain of Youth, because there's legit only one place in the world where the word casque is used for a container, and that's inside the Fountain of Youth. If you didn't go into the Fountain of Youth, you wouldn't know that. You wouldn't know that word.
The exact same way.
Right.
It's spelled the exact same way. Yeah. I would say, like, if you had to choose one over the other, I would say this is not a private place. It's not an attraction. It's not somewhere you got to pay to get into. You can, it's a park. You can go there in the middle of the night and do whatever
park,
you want.
You know,
as we do.
Park. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
That's cool. So,
I was just going to say that, the amphitheater itself, like, the ticketing area, like you have to pay to get in, but the garden itself is, I mean, even to this day, like if you go down there on a Saturday, there's like, people out there with their bikes, there's people walking their dogs, there's people, now they're not frequently in the garden, because I think most people, it's pretty grown up in there, so they don't do that, but there's plenty of people using that area in general for, recreation.
Yeah. Locals kind of know that this is the one part tourists don't know about. So we can go there to be alone.
Yeah.
We also know, like, we don't want anybody else to know about it, because it's how we see free concerts. Because if anything's playing at the amphitheater, you just go hang out in the garden and listen to the show. But back in the 70s and 80s, this was laid out the same as Fort. Is it Fort Raleigh or Fort Hamilton? Am I saying it wrong? Fort Raleigh? It's Fort Raleigh, right? And
Fort Raleigh's in Roanoke. Yeah, I don't know where Fort Hamilton is.
Okay, for some reason I had Fort Hamilton in my head. It's laid out the same as Fort Raleigh in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, wherein there weren't really any gates.
Right.
You could walk to the stage if you wanted to. The ticket office was closed, but you could just walk right around it and go to the stage, as far as I know. Because the gardens extended into the amphitheater, which is going to become important soon.
So there are a lot of similarities, obviously, that we've talked about so far between Roanoke and this puzzle. And we've talked about puzzles coming in twos. We've talked about a lot of similarities popping up in other puzzles. So, there may be a link there that it's just their sister puzzles somehow, and that they're going to be very, very similar. And if it is backstage, then it lends credence to the idea of the Roanoke puzzle also being somewhere in the actual theater grounds, especially when it says, look north to the wing and dig. We have the wing of the theater, which is, a strong idea. My question is, we found Saloy. How do we tie that into this solve?
Well, so I can get my sort of stretchy where people are going to be like, no, that's probably not it way. Stephen, do you have a way to tie in Saloy?
I mean, I just imagine that this is about, if I were Byron and I didn't know that much about it, and I just knew that, like, hey, I went to the Fountain of Youth, right? And he's writing down all this stuff that's there. He's like, oh, well, the tribe here was Saloy, right? Well, that play, Cross and Sword, is all about, Menendez and the Matanzas and, the slaughter
the
and all
Indians
that.
in St. Augustine.
So if I were Byron and I wasn't super well versed on what tribe it was there, I'd be like, oh, Saloy, it's the Saloy tribe, and this is about the Indians. That's where I get that. But the other thing, that I don't know if anybody else picked up on this, but that, if we're going to talk about acrostics, that actually John Michaels pointed out there's another acrostic at
Boat T.
Yeah, or at Boat. If
it was John Hardapy.
Well, was it John Hardapy? Okay. That it was at the base of the tall tree is actually an acrostic for at Boat. Mm-hmm. Well, if we're talking about again, with the years pass, I mean, with the stars move by day and sails pass by night, and that being the boat, and
Yeah.
is it that boat?
Jumping right to the at boat, you've got the two largest palm trees that are in the park are back by they sort of flank the boat. On either side of the boat are two giant towers that are called moon towers. Like there's a lot of cool stuff back there, but I think we might be jumping ahead a little bit.
Like teardrops.
Keep me in line,
like
George.
moonlight and teardrops.
How do you guys reconcile the first chapter? It being a very prominent.
I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, like it being a very prominent, at the entrance of the Fountain of Youth. Wouldn't you think that would lead you right into the Fountain of Youth?
So there's a funny story, just as a side note to the Fountain of Youth, that I want to tell before Stephen goes into his idea. The first chapter on the Fountain of Youth, if you ask John Fraser, he's not sure it was there in 81. Said it was named by his father. He said it would have been right around that time. He said it could have been 80, it could have been 82. He's not exactly sure. Now, having said that, I think I've seen photos of it in the 70s where it says that, but we're not 100% sure anymore, according to John Fraser, who I take his opinion on this as pretty well stolen, whether that was there. But
okay, so let's run under the assumption that it was there. Yes,
that it was. Okay, what are you thinking, Stephen?
Well, so my thought, and I haven't seen this ever mentioned before, and I would be surprised though if somebody else didn't notice this as well. So, I literally sort of went, okay, well, first chapter of what? I mean, first chapter of American history. Well, that makes sense. I mean, so the first chapter of American history would be St. Augustine, right? So you could throw that away if you wanted, or you could get literal. And so I literally went to the first chapter of The Secret. And it says, man built his cities and his villages and diminished the fair people's domain. Where once lived a goblin, there rose a tavern, and where once swam a river maiden, a water wheel spun. And that's like, if I remember correctly, that's the only part of the first chapter that mentions water at all. And I was like, oh, water wheel. So we've got literally a water wheel at essentially the entrance. So I've talked to a couple of people. You really wouldn't notice it now if you went in there because it's incredibly grown up. But I've talked to one of the guys who, well, first of all, I talked to Laura, whose dad was he was sort of the caretaker and the creative director there during Cross and Sword. And then in, I believe it's in 85, I'm gonna forget the guy's name though, but I walked through him like with an hour and a half and interviewed the guy. And he was telling me about what had been there before. And so if you look right here, there is our water wheel, and what he referred to as the duck pond right there. So I don't know if you can see it directly in the center there, but there's a water wheel. When you go in there now, that water wheel, the remnants of it there, the wheel itself is not there. But the all the, everything else that sort of holds it in place and collects the water. But the other thing that you oh, by the way, too, if we want to talk about still can hear the honking, there was our geese
Definitely
that were
some
on
geese there
that were there.
Yeah.
Well, all you would need for Byron is the duck pond.
Yeah, that's all you would need.
Right.
In the book, not the Webster's Dictionary, Byron says that ducks honk.
That's
and then
right.
to add a little bit of support to your first chapter, that wouldn't be the only time that the book uses something from, like, in a verse from the front of the book, because everybody in Milwaukee always, questions what's a wonderstone. Well, the book tells you in the first chapter of the book what a wonderstone is.
Right.
So that's just another thing that would kind of help support your idea of the first chapter with the water wheel.
Right.
What's
and again, so one of the things I was going to say about this right quick is that the caretaker that I spoke to said that basically there was only one thing that was ever lit in there, and it was this area right here. And it was sort of like, it was clear whenever it was, what did he call it? He called it like a diorama, I think is what the term he used, which is not necessarily correct, but when you would come into the amphitheater and you would go park your car over on the left, there was this water wheel and the lake or a little duck pond and a little fountain, and it was just very picturesque. This was the part of the garden that was the most visible at night. And during the day, obviously you could see it, and there was more to the garden. But if you were coming to there at night, the only thing that was really lit up was this water wheel.
Have either of you read Cross and Sword?
Yes.
Where does the first chapter or the first act of that take place?
That's a good question. I can't remember now if it's in Spain or if it's in St. Augustine, but I'm pretty sure it's in St. Augustine.
Yeah, I recall reading it. Laura sent me a version of it. I have not read all of it. We did talk about the first chapter on it and see anything notable in there.
No, there was nothing really notable.
Gotcha.
But the difficult thing about Paul Green plays, just like the Lost Colony, is there's so many versions of it. That's like they changed it every year. They changed the script every single year. So the local library, the St. Augustine, the main branch library, has one has a copy from 1984, and that's the one I read. So if anybody wants to check it out, it's at the library.
Well, and just occurred to me as well, another interesting idea with tying it to the amphitheater is, in Roanoke, you have the references to the painter White. Well, you might have references to Paul Green with the green picket fence. I don't know, just throwing it out there. But
yeah, but in the 70s, there's a newspaper article at the Historical Society. If you go to the Historical Society, they got a big file on the amphitheater, and in one of the news articles in that file, there is a thing where the Boy Scouts came down to the gardens and worked with the ladies' auxiliary, I think, and they installed green picket. They installed and painted green picket fences.
Laura told me, because I was asking her about it. Laura has been there since she was like 5 years old, and so and she acted in it. Her dad was like the director. She doesn't recall seeing the green picket fence, which to me, I still feel like the green picket fence is the entrance to the entrance to the quarry. And there's currently one there now. I can't prove that there was one back then, but the other thing that Laura said was the only place she really recalled there being a fence, when I walked through it with her, is if you were standing up where the monument is, there's like a steep grade that drops down into the lake that's out there. And she said she thought she remembered there being a fence along that to keep people from,
falling into the lake. That could have been where the fences were installed. I'm not real sure.
Possibly.
The article, the article doesn't say where they were, just that they installed a lot of them. So maybe that was it. Maybe that's what they're talking about.
Yeah. That one I think is lost to time.
This quarry, what do you know what they pulled out of the quarry?
So yeah, it was a coquina quarry. It was 100% a coquina quarry.
Limestone and shell.
Everything that was built in St. Augustine from the time it was founded until the quarry shut down, the stone was pulled out of that quarry. So the fort was built out of that quarry. The parts of the Fountain of Youth were built from that quarry. Basically, everything was built from that quarry.
Yeah. The other thing to point out, you were asking me earlier about how I got down to that area. And again, I'm sure people have pointed this out before, but the shape of the rock not only outlines Florida, sort of, right? But it also sort of looks like the island itself. You were able to look at a map of the Anastasia Island. It looks very much the same shape as what in there's a sort of a motif, like there's sort of there's just sort of a direction from the top left to the bottom right. And if you looked at it, it looks like A1, right? It looks like the highway that leads from the top left down to the bottom right.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I think sort of gets me out to that area.
So in this image, in this painting, there's only ever been a couple of things that we've been able to identify. There's the famous alligator that I was never able to see until, and John Michael's always made fun of me for the alligator.
It's alligator.
Head. Yeah. There's
I
the
see
rock.
It. Yeah.
I see it now.
Yeah.
It had to be pointed out to me. And I was like, oh, that's super obvious. Well, how did I miss that shit?
I see two
I'm glad
alligators.
you finally see it.
There's the rock in the middle of the water, right? And people are always like, why is this rock just sitting in the middle of the water? But what is a landmass surrounded by water? It's an island.
Yeah.
Right? It's just an island sitting in the painting.
Well,
and that to me, that's the easiest way to get you to the island. There's only one island in St. Augustine. We call it the island.
Yeah.
Well,
and I think that represents multiple things, obviously. I mean, one, I don't
disagree with that at all.
Clearly, we can, here, I'll go back to our rock. So I've been all over St. Augustine. Like that right there looks to me like that right there.
Yeah. It was even better when
Yes.
it had the giant palm tree behind it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There was one that right back here. So to me,
Actually, I think there's a picture of that on 12 Treasures. Yeah.
It's right. I think to me, there's no mistaking that, but there's other places around St. Augustine where there's little tiny versions of these rocks. And there's that one that's out there on Highway 16, out by the old Fountain of Youth, or whatever they call it. So, I guess that could be subjective, but to me, paired with all the other things that's in here, this is not subjective anymore. But
it's also important to point out what that rock is. Like right now, it's just a rock in the middle of a parking lot. But back when the play was going on, that was the sign for the cross and the sword. It had a giant cross, a giant sword on it. It was the first thing you saw when you came into the park.
Right.
Like you drive into the driveway, it's right there on the left. You can't miss it. It's 5 foot tall, 8 feet wide. Like there's no way to miss it.
It's huge. It's bigger than it looks in that picture. Like when you stand next to it, it's like taller than you are.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I see it as is like, if you're looking at the painting as a relief of Florida, right? It's Lake Okeechobee, right? It's mirrored in the water, and it's essentially also the shape of Lake Okeechobee, which is another confirmer for Florida, which, I've got thoughts about that as well, but I don't know if we want to save that to the end or not.
It is your show. We're going to go where you want to go.
Yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to walk through before we get to that point? I don't know.
Well,
Bradley's or Brent's privy to that part of it. But.
He is. No, I don't know that he is. I haven't told them anything that you haven't put online. So unless you've put it online.
Well, in that case, let's walk through a couple other things. We're talking about visual confirmers just in the park, right? Just things that you can actually see right now. Let's go back. All right. So obviously this is like one of the major confirmers. If you just, and to me, that's another thing. If like you were just looking at parks around, if you were in 1983 and you were looking at parks around the St. Augustine area and you walked in here and you saw this, you'd be like, oh, okay, I need to keep looking. Right.
And what people can't see in this photo is these rocks actually have kind of like groove cut-in marks on them from when they were mined. So they have markings on them.
Does, yeah.
Exactly. You can't see that in this image, but they're there.
So one of the other things that stood out to me a lot when I walk through here, and I've been looking for before I even came to the amp, was somewhere that looked like this. To me, this right here looks like rushing water under a bridge. It looks like we're looking sort of across a bridge, and the two little peaks there are like the peak of the bridge. And so I'd been looking around St. Augustine for that sort of thing. Cause the whole thing is about written in water, and there's so many references to water in the verse. And so I was looking for that. Well, here's the deal. Like, first of all, here's the footbridge. That's, when you go there, you almost don't even know you're stepping across this bridge. And I had to clear this out, like, and stomp down all this stuff. But this is made of coquina right here. And right here is essentially a trough. Now you can't see it, but if you were there at the space, you can feel along it. There's like a trough that sort of runs down into the lake. And so a lot of the stuff that I see in the painting, which to me looks like rock and coquina, is all sort of found in this area. So there was the bridge I feel like I was looking for, right? That also leads out into the duck pond. There's also at the front entrance behind the let's see, where am I? So the rock, the big rock, is like straight ahead in this image right here. But one of the things, again, you can't see right now, I had to clear it out, and George can tell you when you're there, it's a lot easier to see this, but this is a pool. This would have been another pool of water right here. And there's like let's see, I think it's hidden over here by this tree, but there's also like a bird bath over there. But this is the shape of what I called the marlin at the bottom here. And there was water rushing into it from above. It had like a waterfall that came right into here. The other thing is whenever you're, what I call the steps. And so there's a couple of places like this out here, but this was the first one where I really was like, oh, wow, this looks exactly like it. Like this would have been where water would have came down through here and it would have pooled in here. And you also have this series of steps right here that to me line up and look like it. They also had one of these that led into the marlin pool, the thing that I call the marlin. But that was another visual confirmer to me. And one of the things that, again, you can't see until you're like in there and you really start kind of digging in and like stepping into these areas, is that this whole garden was the, to me, like the written in water part. Like there's no place in St. Augustine where you would have had, to my knowledge anyway, this amount of like, it's basically like a little water park.
Yeah.
George?
So I guess for audio people, what we're talking about right now are, if you go into this park, it's hard to imagine scale, even with video. If you go into this park, everything that we're talking about right now is within sight. It's in an area the size, less than the size of a baseball field from one point to the other. There's a bunch of pools, and a bunch of the pools sort of look like parts of the paintings. And they all sort of make a path. If you start at the rock, you've got the water wheel, and then you've got what he's calling the marlin pond. The duck pond is behind all of it. So yeah, and they do, like, I kind of agree. And in the world of people showing me things and being like, this is this, these are a little more concrete than some of the other things that people have told me. Like I can at least visualize what you're seeing here. It's hard to know for sure because it's so overgrown, because there's just shit everywhere. Like we got no idea what this looked like in the 80s.
I mean, literally when I got in there, there were like the pool, the thing that they call the duck pond was literally not visible. Like I went into it and stomped down. Like I kind of found the edge of it and then went around and stomped down the edges of where the coquina, but essentially it's, there's a lot of things in the painting that kind of look like teeth around the edges of the, I think the part where people call the blade, or the bird wing or the bird that's at the top right corner.
Yeah.
If you think about it as a pool of water with the teeth part that surround it being the coquina, like that's exactly kind of how all the pools in there are. They're all these little rock troughs with coquina edging all around them. And then when you see those, you can suddenly start seeing a lot of the things that are, what seems to be represented in the painting. And there's no other place around St. Augustine, I think, that comes even close to that, except maybe out at the marina. They sort of have like a weird sculpture pool out in front of the marina that, kind of has that same thing going on, but not like the amp does.
Not nearly as visible to tourists as the amp would be.
And then past that, if we want to reveal this, so okay, here's, I feel like I've been walking around with this for forever, just because I feel like I needed to keep this under wraps while I was trying to look at things. But at this point, I feel like I've run out of options, and maybe somebody else can, find something else. But one of the things that shocked me when I found it was it. So I've been doing a lot of research on the amp and was like, what was the gardens looking like? Doing a lot of digging with the Historical Society, which is, they are a wealth of knowledge over there. Have a ton of pictures. Their website is actually very, very useful. But what's kind of cool about it is that there are sometimes just descriptions of things that are on the Historical Society site. And they're like, well, if you want to see the picture, like, contact us and we'll send you the picture, or we'll do a clipping. Or you can just send them an email and say, hey, I'm looking for information about so-and-so. Don't tell them about the secret, because that tends to...
Yeah, they won't help you. Yeah, that shuts down the conversation.
What do you say
immediately?
What do you say you're looking for?
Well,
you're digging for buried treasure?
Yeah, I kind of told them that I was doing a little a documentary on the which it wasn't. In the end, I have a lot of footage. So if I ever find the casque, or somebody does, I've got footage to put together this documentary. But
yeah,
I was basically said that, hey, I'm doing like a some research and a documentary on the amp, and I found that they had this, but I can't find pictures of that. And so they started kind of digging and doing research for me, and they started sending me pictures. Well, one of the things, so I just want to preface this before I show it. When you look at the painting, right? It's like a relief, right? Because if we're saying that the water is the shape of Florida, right? And then the land mass that's in there is actually the shape of like the water, right? It's kind of opposite of what we would expect to see. But so, but we've read it as like, hey, here's the panhandle of Florida. Here's the rock is like where Lake Okeechobee is. So what if you've been looking at that, right? And you're like, oh, it's like what? It's like Florida is like a pool of water, right? And you walked in and you saw this right here, which is Florida in a pool of water
with a little rock
with Lake
right
Okeechobee.
Little rock right there,
and look at the reflection underneath it.
Well, look at that,
and some trees right behind it, where you can almost see the reflection of a tree right beside the right there beside the reflection. So whenever I saw that, I flipped my lid. I was like, oh my God, this was there. This was like the thing that was in there. And look at it, surrounded by coquina rock, right? And it right on the right-hand side where essentially where the St. Augustine was, that's where you have a waterfall, which probably also is what the steps look like in the painting, but we can't see those any longer. And it would have dumped from into the place where St. Augustine was into this pool of water shaped.
Neat.
Yeah, I never knew
pretty
that
compelling.
was there until he showed me that picture. I had no idea it was there.
So do we know where that was?
Yep. Hold on, let's see. So this is the amp this is an amalgam actually of what the amp looks like now, as this was from the architectural firm who redid everything. And if you look right, can you guys see my mouse?
Nope.
No.
Okay, there's like, you see where number 5 is there, right?
Yes.
Right to the left of 5, there's a little blue area
Oh,
right
yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And that's
it.
where it was.
I don't see
and
number
it no
5.
longer exists
Can you
in that area.
Can you point out where number?
It's between 4 and 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you be a little more specific?
Okay, so
if you're looking at the
if you look at the
giant.
So if you look at the top right, the number you see there, the first number you see circled is 1. You look straight down,
3.
that's 3.
Okay.
And then 1 underneath 3 is
Got
4,
it.
and then underneath 4 is
Okay.
5.
Hard to see. Sorry.
Yeah, and then right to the left of that is a little Florida sign.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, yeah, there it is. And so
Damn.
to me, that's confirmation. And here's a couple of other photos. See, here's another one of those waterfalls or steps. And again, written in water, right? We have Florida written in water.
Right.
There's another view of it with the waterfall flowing into that. And then we have, here's
when
another
you
one
say
from
we have Florida written in
distance.
water, does it actually say Florida somewhere, or are you just saying there's a map of Florida in water?
No, yeah, it's just the shape of Florida
Okay.
written in water. But to me,
if you
like,
can, if you're
Yes.
comfortable with it, I would send these photos to George, so when he's editing this, instead of using the screen share, he can show the actual, if you want any of this shared, he can share the
Sure.
actual photo, and it'll look a lot better.
yeah, at this point, I mean, I think we're giving away the farm, right? So why not?
Is it? This is.
You're going to have final
I don't-
choice on edit, so George will put it together and send it to you, and then you can say thumbs up, thumbs down, take this out, keep that. So you
Yeah,
have
we're
final
cool.
say on edit.
I mean, we're cool. I think in this
Sorry,
point,
Brett.
again, I think I've held that back for like a year and a half or almost 2 years now, and it's time for someone else to see what they can
Yeah,
do.
and it's not like we haven't put a shovel in the ground out there somewhere. And then that
We
one
tried.
guy
We
dug up
tried.
the entire
Oh
area.
my God. Yeah.
Brett, what were you
I was
say?
going to ask if that's gone now.
Everything.
Okay,
most
so
everything's
that's
gone now.
all right.
I don't know for sure that the footers aren't there, because the whole of the amphitheater looks raised from what it used to be. There's these big retaining walls. So I don't know if they cleared everything out or if they just covered everything up. I don't know which one of those they did. To me, it would be easier to just cover everything up, but so it might still be there, but it would be
It's
way
not-
underground. and
it's
you couldn't
not
find it.
visible.
So here's the other thing about that, and this is where no, it's not visible anymore. My thought is that the rock out front, kind of like in Cleveland, right? I mean, you didn't have to dig at all the places that are located in the photo, right? They were just confirmed. They were just visual confirmers, right? So my hope is that, like the rock out front and the Florida pool are just one of those things when you got there, you're like, you couldn't deny that this was the place, right? Because you're like looking at the giant rock that looks like the rock in the photo. And then you're looking at the shape of Florida in water, just like it is in the painting, essentially, with like a big rock down there by Okeechobee that reflects in the water. That you would see those two things and go, okay, this is where I start. I'm in the right place. And so you weren't like digging out there. But I will say that Laura Olson remembers. Again, these are things that like I didn't even lead her on. I just asked her about the Florida pool, and she was like, "Oh my God, yes, we used to play in that all the time." And it was like my favorite thing because it was lit up beautiful at night. So, in addition to the water wheel that was lit up at night, when you would go into the theater, that pool of water was lit up as well.
From what I understand, the entrance where that stone is that looks like the island, there used to be a water feature there as well. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's the Marlin pool that I was showing earlier.
No, he's talking about the pool around the rock. I've been told that there was a pool of water around the rock, and there is a pool there. There's like footers and there's an underground pool, sort of the same as the ones inside the gardens, but I cannot find a picture with it having water in it. So I don't know when or if it ever had water in it, or maybe it's just like a surround for plants. The Historical Society told me that it had water in it, but that's about as far as I can get for a confirmation for that.
I haven't seen any confirmation of that.
Like, I've looked at a lot of pictures of that rock, and they've always had dirt. And when I said, I know I said a couple of years ago that thing had water in it, I was going off of the Historical Society's.
Because it would make sense if it did. because, like George pointed out, you would see the reflection of the rock, but you would not see the reflection of the palm tree behind it, the vampire tree, as we lovingly call it.
Right.
So yeah, that's that.
That's pretty compelling stuff.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I came into this prepared to go, yeah, okay, whatever. And this is, I want to come down and check out the amphitheater again. I can tell you that much.
So a couple of years back, I hooked up with one of the people that worked there, and we were able to dig a couple of holes. We dug a lot around the rock. So to me, my thing was always that, like, really, really simple. I have something that looks exactly like something else in the painting. I want to dig next to it. And as soon as you go into the amphitheater, right behind the rock, there's a gate, or at least there was. There's not anymore. There's still the fence post for it. And I always ran under the assumption that the Boy Scouts were putting up green picket fences. We've got the fence posts here. We've got a fence outline. That green picket fence was probably right there, right next to that rock. So you would have had a rock with a green picket fence running right beside it with the giant palm tree. Looks just like at the painting. That was my focus. When the amphitheater was bulldozed, the front facade, like I said before, looked like a giant wooden fort, and out in front of the fort were a bunch of big coquina boulders. Well, they took those boulders and they put them where that fence running beside the rock would have been. So it's basically like 10-ton coquina boulders over this one section where I really, really want to dig. But I hooked up with the park guys, and we dug a bunch of holes around that stone, and we didn't find anything. And then later on, before the San Francisco episode of Expedition Unknown, I was working with those guys, and we were trying to get a GPR out there. We never got the GPR out there, but they still let me dig a shit ton of holes, and still we didn't find anything. And then recently, when Stephen, you posted a bunch of stuff online about the amphitheater, and someone just went absolutely apeshit out there.
Yeah,
dug holes everywhere, destroyed the whole. Like, there's still huge holes that this guy didn't fill in. Yeah, it's bad. Around the first monument that he showed you, as soon as you climb the steps, it's just nothing but big piles of dirt and giant holes all around the water wheel. Is giant holes.
This is why people don't want to share stuff with you. Stop, community.
Yeah, right. It's crazy. It was just like, I guess it was a local dude or somebody at least semi-local. Maybe, I guess maybe he could have come down over the weekend, because it all happened over like 2 or 3 days. And it was just that park. One day it was nice, and the next day we came back and it was just full of holes. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was disheartening, to say the least.
Yeah, and you could tell, like, it wasn't like the dude didn't have really any ideas. I think he just saw Steven's stuff and thought it was great, because it was everything that Stephen posted a picture of had huge holes around it.
That's not how to dig.
Yeah.
We George and I were checking out the amphitheater one night, and we hit something that made a loud pop sound, and I swear that it was an electricity line of some sort. And I'm surprised that one of us didn't die.
Yeah.
Y'all, it is, I tell you what, it's scary out there, because that place, so during COVID, there's been at least a couple of times I've gone out there at the beginning of COVID and was like, just slept in my car, and you know, like,
that's kind of dangerous, Stephen.
You're a brave man.
Well, then
there's like, I don't know if you know, but there's a homeless encampment in the woods there.
Oh yeah, I found it.
Okay.
That's not a secret. The secret to me. Yeah. Well, and one night I woke up and saw like an old guy and a bunch of teenagers with like flashlights starting to go into there. And I was like, oh, I know what these guys are about. All right. And so like I get out of my car and go up there. I'm like, y'all treasure hunting? They're like, no, we're ghost hunting.
Oh.
I was like, all right. And so I tagged along and watched these guys like do that. But I've also seen things where it looked like drug deals going on out there, like people waiting and other people showing up and doing whatever. But I tell you what, the scariest thing to me though was one night. So there's a section. So there's a part where I think there's an actual direction in the verse that's like, you know, over the tall grass, it's like moonlight and teardrops over the tall grass, years pass, rains fall, right? So there's a couple of places where I feel like that lines up with something right there. And I was like, all right, so matter of fact, to me, there's a part you can go. I don't think I didn't drag it into what I'm working on tonight, but there's a in the painting. Actually, let's see. In the painting, there's an actual shadow of the monument. And
Can't really make that out.
Yeah, I'll have to send it to you. It's on one of the Facebook pages, but
you got a blur thing going on there.
Oh, that's right. Here, maybe if I hold it beside my face. No, but there's a
I got one of those.
I know, isn't this cool? So anyway, in the painting, there's a representation of the monument, and to me, it was like, okay, well, it's trying to say that, like, looking over that, if it was years past, right? Because if we're talking about 1967 or whenever it was dedicated to, 1967 by the Cherokee Garden Club, if you were to read that and be like, oh, years pass, rains fall, and the rains are falling over by the waterfall over there, you're looking for a light, right? You're looking for the moonlight in teardrops over the tall grass. So I was like, where is the only place where this would have been lit? Where after a day of digging in there, there's the one place where they have a pole that has multiple light fixtures on it that would have been lighting up the water wheel. And so I was like, okay, I have to do this at night so I can see what you would have seen then, right? So I like put up, went out and took one of my video lights and I put it in this one part, and then decided I was going to wait until it got dark, and then I got in my position back there, and I'm sitting there in the dark, waiting to, like, and actually it was a flash, so it didn't go off, but it wasn't like continuous lighting; it was a flash. So I'm sitting in the dark, and I was popping this flash, but then I heard like,
no,
but it was like something. It felt like something really big, and it kept getting closer, and then I hear, and which scared the shit out of me, because then it was like, I guess it was a frog or something nearby. But finally I took my phone flashlight and I was like turn it on and like turn to the right, and there's like a possum like 2 feet from me, and he just looks up like, what's up, man? He just keeps on. But yeah, awesome. I was afraid like there was an axe murder or something back in there.
Oh man, I was thinking alligator
for a second.
Yeah. Oh, that would have been worse. Yeah.
So I will say, having just heard that story, if anybody goes out to visit the amphitheater, there's a rule: you have to bring peanuts for Byron.
Yes.
So Byron's still around. I saw Byron the other day. Byron is a chicken that lives at the amphitheater. He's a rooster. You can't miss him. He's loud and he will follow you around everywhere you go. You have to bring him peanuts, or he will not be happy.
Yes, and if you ask him where the casque is buried, he will take you to a place twice.
Yeah.
He's told me a place twice. The casque was not there whenever I looked for it, but I did ask Byron out of frustration, and he did stop what he was doing and came. But he will also scare the crap out of you. The first time that I encountered Byron, I was walking along and he was walking behind me, and then he decided to crow, and I almost lost it.
That's a cool chicken.
Yeah, George took me out there, and we walked those paths along, like there was like a fitness path or something like that, and it went by a pond, and the entire time I was like, we're gonna get eaten by an alligator. This is one of us is losing a leg.
That park, like, I would have loved to have seen that park in its heyday. Like, it sounds so cool.
Yeah,
it did. It had like they had a bunch of gym equipment all strewn about the. It was a trail, I guess, for old people to stay fit.
It's called the park course.
Yeah, the park course. That's what it was.
They
were all numbered. Where's music coming from?
That's my.
Sounds like a doorbell.
They must have ordered pizza at my house. There's a.
Oh, fun.
And if anybody's wondering what that panting noise is, Stephen has a very adorable dog in the background. So that's what that is.
He's very cute.
That's Stella.
Yeah, so the park course had a bunch of like treadmills and ellipticals and different stuff like that in it. They finally took up the last of them just before the pandemic, so they're all gone now. But there were a couple of them there last year.
Here's part of the park course right here. You can see this gentleman's getting his workout on.
Yeah.
And then
it's crazy. It's crazy to look at that now, look at that picture and know where these things are and to see what the places look like now.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the steps just to the left of where you were, like that's all overgrown forest, nothing. Oh no, that's not. That's the stage steps. Okay, never mind.
Well, there is. I'm trying to find the other version of it too. There's another. Maybe I don't have it here, but yeah, there's some pictures I have that, and I can send it to you and you can post them. But there's some pictures I have where it is just wide open out there, and you would never know. Dang, I want to show you though. Let's see.
So while you're looking for that, I always try to anticipate questions that the audience may come up with or rebuttals that somebody may come up with. So I was reading Wikipedia and I was reading about the Cross and Sword, and the official name Cross and Sword, a symphonic drama of the Spanish settlement of Florida. This play is a musical reenactment depicting Florida's early history at St. Augustine, especially its colonization by Spaniard Pedro Mendez and his settlers' bloody conflicts with the French Huguenots and Fort Caroline in present-day Jacksonville. So it's interesting that it covers all the way up to Jacksonville as well. But in case anybody's curious and wants to know that, that's kind of the quick synopsis.
Yeah, and it's I wouldn't recommend if you see this and you're like, oh, I want to check out the gardens. A lot of times when treasure hunters go to places like this for the first time, they take trips and then they go at night. Do not go to the gardens at night. Not because you're gonna like get murdered or anything. You're gonna get hurt.
Yeah.
Like if you listen to some of the earlier podcasts where it was me and John and I was talking about like digging and like breaking my foot and like getting jabbed with giant palmetto spears. Yeah. And I wouldn't tell anybody where I was. Yep. This was where I was. Like it's legit. You'll be walking down what you think is a path and step off of a 3-foot drop into an old lake. So don't go at night. Yeah, your first time at least.
Do as we say, not as we do.
And go with somebody. Don't go by yourself.
Yeah.
By the way, here. All right. So here's one. I think I got to thank Laura for sending me this. So this is a little blurry, but here's the front, which George was talking about a while ago, that had a huge wall in the front and was lavishly decorated in the front. It was beautiful. And there's those rocks he was talking about. They've since moved those rocks that are right there in the front over to the side of the big rock that we now know, the one he was trying to dig under. Yeah. There's the water wheel in its heyday.
So that's actually exceptionally similar to the entrance of the amphitheater in Fort Raleigh. Exceptionally
lots of similarities.
Yeah. Here's this bird bath is still there. That's right behind the big rock. And what I was calling the Marlin pool. That's where that's at. Here's another. Here's the fountain, the duck pond, and the water wheel. But here's the biggest thing. Like this is like a big beach back here and this landing where like the ducks can like none of this is all trees now. Like it's all grown up. Like it was wide open out there. Same like here.
And it's just a jungle.
That's crazy.
It's just the jungle now.
It looks nothing like that anymore.
So if
this would have been similar to how he would have seen it back then.
If you had to put you on the spot, if you were forced to dig in one place, where would it be?
So, please don't, because it's already been done. So this is
after this. I want you to go back to those photos. After this, I want you to go back to those photos.
Okay,
go ahead.
So here, so
you don't have to if you don't want to. By the way,
no, I will. So this is kind of the layout of the the amp, like when you first, or the garden, I should say, when you first walk in. And one of the things that stuck out to me was this. So you see the thing kind of looks like an arrowhead.
Mm-hmm.
That is actually a big pool, what used to hold water, and at the like the bottom of the shaft, if you will, was where the water wheel was. And so I was like, oh, how cool would it have been? Because it points, like it literally points directly north. And I don't mean like figuratively. I mean like by a compass, it like aims directly north. And if you look, that blue line right there is where it's going from where the light is, where that only light I was talking about earlier, that only light directly across the monument and directly back into behind this, where the steps are, or the waterfall back here is. There was sort of a converging area. And there's also a post back there that looks like it could have been part of a green picket fence, but I can only find one of the posts, but it's kind of hidden back there. But that was the general area of where I've been looking. And my thought is that if I knew where the rest of those posts were, then we could have had a sort of a straight line of where to start probing and digging. But it's a rather large area back there. It's like, hunting for the proverbial needle in a haystack in that area. But that's where
it's like looking for a casque in St. Augustine.
That's exactly right. But to me, that lined up with the moonlight and teardrops over the tall grass, because that monument, and again, I can send a picture to George, but that monument lines up with something exactly in the painting that has the tall grass. It's essentially the thing people were talking about in Fountain of Youth, where they were looking for the tree, or they were looking for the fountain that was over a fence or whatever it was. It's essentially that same thing, but it's the same shape as the monument.
Was this place
Brent,
sorry. What
did you want me to go back to this? Is that what
was this place like littered with green picket fences at the time?
So Stephen said earlier that he doesn't think they were, that someone who was in the play doesn't remember a whole bunch of them. There was a green picket fence around the pond. And I know there were picket fences out there. I just don't know where they were.
But like, I asked that because like, if you found this spot and you went, whoa, there's all these visual confirmers from the image, and some of the verses lining up.
Yeah.
You could narrow it down by one of a handful of green picket fences, right?
Yeah, but the crappy thing about Florida weather, man, is if you build anything out of wood, it's only going to last, like any of that crap wood that they use for fencing. It's only going to last like 10 years, especially that close to the salt water. It's just going to rot. I mean, nothing out there that's made out of wood lasts. So if you put up a green picket fence in 1973, it's going to be about to fall over by 1983. And if you put one up in 1981, by 1991, it's going to be destroyed. So, who knows? And that's not something Byron would have known if he came down for a couple of days and he saw a green picket fence. He's not going to think, well, weather's going to rot this in a couple of years.
Or they'll just put it right back up.
Yeah, or they'll build another one, or they won't, or whatever.
Right.
So I had two questions about those images. The first question I had was, are we certain that it's a bird bath and not a sundial?
No, it's a bird bath.
It's a bird bath.
Okay. It's other question is, what can you tell us about the middle picture on the far right with what appears to be a cross and a fence?
Oh, I think that's a optical illusion.
A tree, right? Yeah, it just looks like a tree.
Yeah, that's interesting though. I think it's an optical illusion based on like where the sun is dappling on the tree.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it does look like a cross. But I mean, some of that is still out there. Some of those, like the plank or the walkways, and some of them have been rebuilt. But it's interesting though. I want you to see something like that. like I showed you guys earlier the walkway, and this walkway was way more prominent back then. Look at that.
Yeah.
Like it's nearly buried now where you can barely tell, but look how much more of a bridge it is.
Right.
So that's that where the water's coming out underneath the bridge that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that.
That's that spot.
Yeah, that's
Stephen?
Compelling. Definitely compelling.
Is that where you were when you took that
it's just
picture?
30 years of
right there.
Not even 30 years of not
Yeah.
even just mismanagement. It's 30 years of completely not being touched. Things growing up and rotting and dying and rotting where they, falling wherever they, and it's just bad. Vines everywhere. Like literally no one has touched it in 30 years. It became a jungle.
I mean,
the paths are all covered up in dirt and old palm fronds or whatever.
I mean,
plants growing up everywhere.
Right now, they cut a tree right next to it, and the tree is just cut up in giant chunks, and it's just laying all up in here on the other side of this. Yeah. Again, like there's times you're just walking past something, and you would just never know what it is that you're looking at until, like George says, you almost fall off of something. You're like, wait, what is this? And then you like start kicking around. Right. You're like, oh, look at this. Completely. There's a whole other trough back here or waterway or whatever. But literally, I mean, for a verse that talks so much about water, I mean, there's so much out here regarding water.
Yeah.
Right. And one thing we forgot to mention earlier, that rock that you see when you first come into the amphitheater, it wasn't just a rock that wouldn't catch your attention. It had a big cross and sword on it. And it was like the hello, you're here at the theater, welcome to the show rock. So it was something that would draw your attention to it. It's something that you would definitely see coming to the amphitheater.
I was gonna see if I have a picture of it. I'm sure George has obviously got this.
There's
picture.
One on 12 Treasures.
Yeah.
There's one on 12 Treasures right next to the rock in the painting. It's hard to deny. It's difficult to deny.
I know it's funny because I was listening to you talk on one of the previous chats a couple weeks ago or either last week, and you were like, well, it's hard to deny FOI. I mean, here's the thing. But this one is also.
Yeah. The Fountain of Youth has a lot of good verse stuff. Yeah. But, if I'm playing devil's advocate, everything except casque, everything except the word casque and the word silver, because you're not going to find anything silver in St. Augustine. But all of the really good verse match stuff for the Fountain of Youth, you can find all over the city.
Yeah.
Like it's not exclusive to the Fountain of Youth.
But again, if you take that line and you're like, okay, what are the things that I have? What are the things that are common with each of these things? You're like, oh, well, they're all four things that you would have to get out of the ground. You would have to quarry out of the ground: silver, salt, limestone, everything. So quarry is like your answer for that, if it is indeed the answer for that, but it makes just as much sense. But I do feel like, he like walked through it and he was like, oh, here's all the cool like terminology. Like, while he was in there, he's like, here's some cool, and in a way it's almost not even inventive. It's kind of, it was almost lazy. I mean, because casque doesn't mean what casque means,
Right.
Yeah.
One day when we were digging at the Fountain of Youth, and George, you can cut this if you think it shouldn't be out in the wild, but I don't think it'll be a big deal. Stephen hears it. Myself, George, and Brian Zen were out checking a few spots, and we were at the back, and Brian was like, this one area always caught my attention, and I was always curious about it. And there's like the perfect match at the base of a tall tree. It was a placard for the fort of somebody Pine. And we were like, well, what's another word for a fort? Well, it's a base. What's a pine? A pine is a tall tree. This is literally the base of a tall tree.
Yeah.
But George dug all
That's
around it, and there was nothing there.
Yeah. We got a GPR out there, and then we still couldn't find anything.
But there are so many things that are a mystery about all of it. Like, when you talk about like, the fact that they hid the the fort and the flag, or you've got like, the thing that got me was like looking at whoever it's supposed to be, Ponce de Leon, Menendez, whatever. He has no armor on except for the helmet, right? But he's got this vest. And that vest, to me, there's only one place in St. Augustine that matches the yellow and green on that vest, and it's right there at Flagler, which is like the hilt. And so one of the things that when I first started looking, is that he's missing all his armor. He's missing all the stuff that's on him. Where do we find all that, right? Well, if you go to Flagler, there's it's a fountain, but it's a sundial. And it's the hilt of his sword, right? Well, now I've found his sword that he didn't have on, and it's got the decorations all around the hilt of the sword are the green and yellow checkered, design on there. So there's so many things like that where you could like walk around, St. Augustine and go, oh, well, this is the only place you would find that. This makes sense. This is but like,
I think we're really good at making this puzzle better than it actually is. Like, we're really good at inventing puzzles. Like, the perfect example is Boston. We focused on Charles Gate on the 2 C's or the CG or whatever for so long,
which looks perfect.
It's an absolutely perfect match to that thing in the painting.
Has nothing to do with
which has nothing to do with it. Nothing at all.
He probably never saw it.
He's probably never seen it. Exactly. But we made like we ignored. So we ignored the, like, how all this fits together and focused more on this one stupid little thing, and then tried to force everything else together. Yeah. And I think the amphitheater, I think the Fountain of Youth, we try to force a lot.
Yeah.
The amphitheater, we also try to force a lot. But I think the things that we don't try to force at the amphitheater, like, I think it fits the broader picture a little better. I still, like I've said it a couple of times now, I think we're looking at paintings wrong. I think Ponce is sitting on a horse on top of a landmass planting a flag, which is in essence the story of St. Augustine. And I don't know that it gets any deeper than that for me.
Yeah.
I don't know that we need to look for what shape do the shadows make, or, what the design of the flag matches a river, or what, you know what I'm saying?
I kind of know that from Boston, right? That's the one place where like JJP's like, oh yeah, well yeah, there's
look at
there's kind of the
spells
thing.
Boston right here,
and you're like, what?
Yeah,
you're like, it doesn't go any deeper than that.
It's
like,
funny you said that, George, because
kinda...
the next thing I was going to mention was I would love for somebody to put just the little image of the dude on the horse in front of a kid, somebody in like 5th grade or lower, and say, point out every little thing that you see in this. What hidden images do you see? Because the way this horse is painted and the way the sky is shaped, there's something there that we haven't found. There's no doubt. There's something there that we haven't found.
All right.
And I don't know what it is.
To that point, if y'all don't mind me jumping over to New Orleans right quick, because I do.
No, feel free.
I actually go to New Orleans much more than I go to St. Augustine, but and it's not. I try to really kind of stay out of it because it's Travis's. He's like my best friend, and that's Travis's thing. And I wish he finds. I hope he finds it.
I gotta get him on a podcast at some point.
You do.
I gotta get him to drill down, but I gotta get him on a podcast.
He's got a lot to say. But one of the things that there's a couple of things, and I'm not going to jump into his version of anything except for one, because this is obvious. It's been out there before. But two things. One is part of the verse, and the fact that if you just say at the place where jewels abound, and the first thing you would do if you were to pick up any city, if you were to go into any city and be like, how do I find anything? The first thing you're going to do is grab a map, right? And the first thing I would notice is that going down this map, when you're going down a list of streets, is suddenly you've got opal and amber and turquoise and amethyst, and you've got like, oh, wait a minute. There's all the jewels from The Secret are in this one place. And when you go to look at that on a map, it looks like the Mask. It's up there by like Pontchartrain, and you're like, holy cow! Like all all of the places where the jewels are right here in this place that looks like a mask. And then if you count down 15 rows, 15 streets, it leads you to the street that cuts across City Park, right? Well, one of the things so my daughter, we were going, my oldest daughter was getting married a couple years ago. And so my youngest, when we were going down there, was like, hey, I was like, you want to go take a look at this treasure hunt thing, right? And she was like, oh my God, yeah. So she was like, let me see the painting. So she got the painting. At the time she was, she was 10. And so I'm like, well, what do you see? What is it in here that makes sense to you? And she's like, oh, well, she's like, it looks like you've got like fairy tale stuff going on here. She says you've got you got like the 3 blind mice, right? Because of the clock. She says you have the cow jumped over the moon because of the stars. And I was like, huh, okay. And I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. And then she says, and then you've got the Little Red Riding Hood, right? Because you have the wolf with grandma's dress on, right? And I was like, all right. And so we started looking for more stuff. And I was like, well, somebody mentioned that there's a spoon in here, right? And I put the moon. She goes, yeah, well, that goes with the cow jumped over the moon and the plate and the spoon and whatnot. So we started looking. And so part of the verse that's always gotten me was the part where it says, fays admire, gnomes delight, right? So like, what do we know gnomes for? Like if you just mention gnome to any average person, to me, they say like gardens, right? So in New Orleans, you have 2 places right next to each other. You have Storyland and you have the Botanical Gardens, and they literally are like, they share the property. They're part of the same thing. When you go into you can buy a ticket for Storyland or the Botanical Gardens at the same desk. So you have fays delight, gnomes admire, right? So I was going through some photos earlier this week. I was scanning a bunch of stuff. And as I was scanning all my photos, oh shoot, I thought I drug some photos in here. I'm going to be bummed out if I didn't. Actually, I can send these to George, though. So one, and I know this has been posted before, but these are my personal photos from 1993, around the time me and my wife got married. So
nice.
Yeah, like you can't deny that.
Come on.
Nice.
You just can't do it.
First of all, like that's at the top left hand. It like the boy from Lafayette Park, all right, I could kind of see it, but
that's perfect.
I mean, that's exactly it, right?
And it fits the Sounds of Friends, right? Because they're like talking flowers. You're talking to one, and your friend at the other end can hear your voice. So the Sounds of Friends fill the afternoon hours. Like it makes perfect sense.
Let's see. I mean, me and my wife loved this park. We were there a lot. So it's hard to see. Oh, let's see. There's another version of it. Well, first of all, here's this one too. This one's hard to see as well, but there's our wolf. All right.
Creepy.
From Little Red Riding Hood.
God, that's creepy.
So that exists in there.
Or did.
I think
does it still?
I think that one still does.
So I got this, like, I know they renovated the park in the early 80s. The one was 81, 82, somewhere around there. And I've got it was like 83 maybe when they renovated the park. But I've got the original diagram for the way the park was in like 78, 79. And I can't remember off the top of my head what all was there.
There's your cow jumped over the moon.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was on the ground. Isn't it like hanging up now?
I don't know. I tried to go there. I had my dog with me last time. They wouldn't let her come in. I couldn't get in there to go check. There's also like a place where you can do puppet shows, which makes me think of The Mask, right? Or either the mask is part of like where a jewels abound. But there's also like they had like these sort of Punch and Judy shows that they would show in here. I think that's still there.
Yeah. And another important thing about Storyland back then is you'd have to pay to get in. It was open. There were no walls. There weren't fences or anything.
Yeah. The only thing I remember
that was part of the renovation was they added ticketing and prices and fences.
Peter Pan.
Well, I keep doing that. So yeah, Peter Pan. So there's several things. Like one, the clock could be related to Peter Pan, right? Because Captain Hook's afraid of the clock.
Or Cinderella.
Or yeah, right. Or Cinderella. But I don't know that Cinderella exists in the park. I'm trying to just stay within the things that I know exist. But yeah, you might be right. The wolf, obviously. The cow jumped over the moon. There was another one. Oh, so there was one for Peter Pan. Not Peter Pan. What I was thinking was Pinocchio. Oh, here it is. Again, sorry, these aren't turned already. But so to me, again, my daughter pointed this out, and I who knows what's true, what's not. But this was just from her 5th grade perspective, is that the handle looked like it could be Pinocchio's nose. Oh, yeah. The handle of the mask that they're holding.
Yeah, absolutely.
So those are things whenever you think about like breaking down the picture where you go, oh, well, there's like, because some, for the longest time, like people have been, with both St. Augustine and New Orleans, like, well, there's nothing in the New Orleans that can be, you can't look at that photo and say there's all the stuff there. Like, it's just, it must be something, all in the verse, and the picture doesn't really matter. And you're like, well, if you knew where you were and you're in Storyland and you start breaking it down to, you start breaking it down to like Peter Pan, the clock for either Three Blind Mice or Peter Pan, you break it down to Pinocchio's nose, you break it down to the cow jumps over the moon, you break it down to Little Red Riding Hood, then the whole painting makes sense, and it's all right there.
Yeah.
But how do you explain the vectors?
Oh yeah. Well,
what
now
about
you
all
got
the,
it. Now
what
you
about
got
all
me.
the wolves, Stephen? What about the wolves, man?
There's a lot of wolves.
I'm not going to tell you.
70.
I'm not going to tell you where this is, because this is Travis's. This is part of Travis's solve, or one of his past solves. But I will say that Travis had the most perfect solve ever. That where there not only, first of all, there's the wolf at Storyland, but the place where he was digging had a wolf there, and it was like hidden off in a corner, almost like as if it was watching you.
Oh God.
Where you were digging, and we literally when we covered it all back up, we buried parts of the book in there, because I was like, if it's not here, I want something from The Secret to be here, because it was so
Wow.
perfect.
So you like to actually tore out like a page of the book and put it there?
Yeah. So part of The Secret does exist in that place now.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Stephen, this was amazing, man. I really appreciate you going. That's some really, really good stuff. And now I'm scared of Storyland.
I'm afraid of wolves. And for a guy that, for me, I don't know much about St. Augustine or the St. Augustine puzzle very much. And whenever I hear about it, it's Fountain of Youth. So this was really like not only interesting, but enlightening. And it's nice to see that you're in a different place, and that place is so compelling. But not only that, that is a lot of interesting stuff. And it looks like you've done a lot of work too. So kudos to you. I think that it was fascinating. Appreciate it.
That's the kind of stuff I like to see somebody have when they come to me with information. They're like, I have this really great idea and I want to share it with you. And 90% of the time, if not more, it's just some wild, this could relate to this because a third chapter of this book and the fifth cousin of this guy was named.
Right.
And everything that you gave us for the most part is super concrete.
It's simple too. I mean, it's not,
it's super confirmation bias.
No, I like it.
You could say that, but I mean, that's just because you're in the weeds with it. But like for a lay person like me, thinking about this, I followed you precisely through everything. It all lines up and makes sense to me. And like Bradley said, that's pretty rare because I do get a lot of, solves that aren't like that, like he mentioned, as all of us do. Yeah. So I thought you did a good job. That's great.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on.